Why do you do science? You want to learn something that, why do I do science, I guess? I want to learn something that nobody else has known before. And it may be an important thing, or it may be sort of a small thing. But to me, when I do that, that's what I really find exciting.
We shared a burning goal. And the burning goal, I'm sure each of us phrased differently, whether it's, justice or getting even or the hell with them or however that goal was phrased. There was a burning goal.
The motto of the Holocaust is never forget. It's not an accident that I'm working on these problems. It's almost, a given in some ways. So I could see lots of direct connections with my unpleasant experience in Vienna and what I've done since then.
My mother came into the room, I write about that in my book, and said that morning, March 12th, the 12th, right, 1938, and said, jetzt sind wir nicht mehr Österreicher. Hitler ist gekommen.
Ich wurde herausgeschmissen aus dem akademischen Gymnasium. Also jetzt bist du noch ein Schüler hier und morgen wirst du es nicht mehr sein.
Within a matter of a week, I moved from the first row of my class to the back row of my class, to standing in the back of the class, to not be being admitted into the schoolhouse.
Als wir in dem Büro vom Direktor waren draußen eine ganze Gruppe von Schülern, die uns beschimpft haben und bedroht haben. Und das war das erste Mal, dass mir klar war, dass ich jüdisch war.
In a class of about 30, there were maybe 7 or 8 Jewish children, and we were picked on all the time. And so our parents took us out of school.
Some of my teachers are in SA uniform. One of them is in SS uniform.
And he gave us lectures about how wonderful the Führer was and how dreadful people were in Austria who were not Nazis, and how dreadful France was, and how dreadful Britain was, and how dreadful, above all, how dreadful Czechoslovakia was.
And of course, that was more or less, don't remember exactly a time when, at the beginning of each class, Heil Hitler, but Jewish students excluded.
You can grab a Jewish man and you can give him a toothbrush and you can make him clean the filth off the street. And it doesn't matter if he's a young man, an old man, a young woman, or an old woman, a professor or a janitor. He's a Jew. And that took 5 years in Germany. It took 5 days in Vienna.
For assimilated Jews, the Nazi experience was more difficult to bear because the Jewish identity wasn't that meaningful to them.
Mit 6 Jahren, wenn man mich gefragt hätte, was bist du, hätte ich gesagt, ich bin ein Wiener, ich bin ein Sozialist, ich bin ein Fußballspieler.
So ein Kind, das hier mit Judenstern herumgelaufen ist, da kennt man kein Wien. Und womöglich so wenig wie möglich herumgelaufen ist, weil es nicht besonders bequem und erfreulich war.
Man konnte ja nicht vermeiden, ganz auf die Straße zu verzichten. Man musste ja ausgehen. Und das war also immer lebensgefährlich. Ich war also auf der Straße und auf einmal kommt ein SA-Mann auf mich zu, kaum älter als ich, und sagt, bist du ein Jude? Ja, komm mit aufs Kommissariat, oder weiß ich, wie er es genannt hat, das ist das Hauptquartier. Und ich weiß nicht, was aus mir geworden wäre, wenn ich dorthin mitgegangen wäre. Aber irgendetwas in mir hat sich gewehrt. Ich habe mir gedacht, der ist nicht stärker als ich, Und er kann mich nicht dorthin schleppen. Und wenn er Hilfe holt, renne ich weg. Und so waren wir ineinander verkrampft. Er hat mich ja bei den Kleidern gehalten und ich musste ihn mitschleppen, aber ich gehe nicht mit. Und bei der nächsten Straßenecke hat er sich anders überlegt, hat mich losgelassen und ist weggegangen. Und ich bin so schnell ich konnte in der anderen Richtung. Also fragen Sie mich, was hat mich damals 15-Jährigen befähigt, dieser Uniform zu widerstehen?
My father wanted to leave Vienna in 1933. When Hitler started marching, he said, this person will destroy the world. It was my mother who didn't want to move from here. She said, why to go to the desert?
England, K. Sonntag. K, Kindertransport. You have to turn up. Could come alone, but usually the parents came along, obviously, to say goodbye. A very difficult choice for many of them. To say goodbye to a child that they may never see again, who is not prepared for life yet, who is going into Die Fremde without any money, with one suitcase, which is to be shown to the Nazi inspectors that there's nothing valuable in it. Mine had a nice book, die Jubiläumsausgabe von Wilhelm Busch.
And so, I said goodbye to my parents at the Westbahnhof.
Und mein Vater, übergab mir ein 5-Schilling-Goldstück oder sowas, als irgendwie im Notfall zu verwenden.
So the train comes. People still deciding whether to put their children in. We are all crowded. It's going to be a locked train until it goes to Holland, a day and a night, and there's no food there. And there are some who don't want their child at the last moment to come. There's a famous story of one father pulling his daughter out at the last moment, a young girl, who then, I saw a film about her, she turned out to be the only survivor of that family through Auschwitz. In my case, the opposite happened, namely through the open window, at the last moment, somebody, a man, put a 3-year-old on my place and said, take care of him.
When we got to Innsbruck, they cleared out the train and searched all our luggage and took all the money. And I remember sitting on a hat box, and my mother was reading Die lustigen Neun. I don't know if you know that book. Oh, that was a wonderful children's book by Josephine Siebe. Die lustigen Neun, great story. And it was pretty nerve-wracking.
Wir kamen nach Köln. Gestapo kommt in den Zug und sagt, alle Juden raus.
There was a BBC reporter there, not with a camera, but with a audio equipment, a British Broadcast Corporation. And he says, children, I hear you have come from Vienna, this whole train. I have met many trains from other places. Why don't you sing something for us? So we all consulted. Believe it or not, we had just fled for our lives from Vienna. But the one song we agreed to sing, and did sing, was Wien, Wien, nur du allein. Soll stets die Stadt meiner Träume sein. Dort, wo die alten Häuser stehen. Dort, wo die hübschen Mädchen gehen, lieblichen Mädchen gehen. Can you imagine that?
We lived in a part of London where there were very few refugees. If we'd lived in Hampstead or Finchley Road or Finchley Strasse, as it came to be known, it would have been different. But I was fortunate in not living in that kind of refugee ghetto because it forced me to behave like an English person It forced me, it enabled me to acquire English without an accent.
The idea of America was fantastic. You know, the streets are paved in gold. And obviously that was not the case in the United States in 1939. There was still a depression here. But there was tremendous enthusiasm that our family felt. We were finally someplace, and we're going to make a go of it.
You know, I went to school in New York, so there were a lot of Jewish kids in the school, but they were, you know, they did all the traditions. I had grown up in a completely secular environment. I didn't even know the tradition. And I was very much aware that in some sense, I ought to be more Jewish than they, because I had to leave, you know, somehow, and yet I felt less, you know. So that was complicated.
Immigration is tough, although I came very little. And I wanted to be as everybody else. And, you know, we have, for cookies, we have a word called sukaria. And I used to say bonbon. And till today, I think that bonbon is nicer, but all the children were laughing when I used to say bonbon, you know, so you are different.
Because children want to belong, and you don't want to hear all the time that we want to keep our customs and our things and not fit in. So when I first went to public school, which was in a sort of mixed neighborhood, not a nice neighborhood, children did ask me if I wore wooden shoes. Didn't we wear wooden shoes? I had braids. I think they thought I was Dutch. I don't know, they didn't know the difference, and so on. But they were very friendly and nice, and on the whole, open. And I wanted to be as American as possible.
Selbst in kleinen Städten in Bolivien, wo ich war, wenn ein neuer Zuwanderer kam, habe ich mir meinen anderen Anzug angezogen, bin hingegangen und habe ihn begrüßt und nach den gewöhnlichen Höflichkeitsfloskeln habe ich Fernsehbücher mitgebracht.
Ich habe wirklich keine Schulbildung, also ich bin da rausgeschmissen worden, bin nie in die Schule gegangen, auch nicht ins Gymnasium, irgendwie bin ich da reingekommen. Nach dem Krieg, wie man es nicht so genau genommen hat. Und am City College in New York haben sie sowieso jeden genommen, der gekommen ist. Praktisch, da war so eine Überschwemmung von Studenten, die aus Europa gekommen sind. Und im Grund haben sie, die Zeugnisse konnten sie nicht lesen, was immer man ihnen vorgelegt hat. Die haben gesagt, ja, bitte, wenn ihr es nach 1 oder 2 Semestern nicht schafft, dann schmeißen wir euch raus. Und wir haben uns alle sehr gemütlich bemüht. Ich glaube nicht, dass das war ein Mädchen-College damals, jetzt nicht mehr Hunter College auf New York, dass irgendeine von denen wirklich rausgeflogen ist.
I didn't have any friends. I came into a school in England. I had trouble with the language, although I had a few lessons, but it was uphill. I wasn't one of the boys. And then I'm displaced yet to another country. I'm different. I don't play their sports well. But what can I do well? I can study. I can get straight A's. And then in medical school, I realized I can do research.
The boss of my laboratory, a man called Wade Marshall, was very laissez-faire. He said, work on whatever you like. So I thought, what's the most important problem in all of psychoanalysis? There's more than one problem, but I said, memory storage. We are who we are because of what we learn, what we remember, and psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, an attempt to allow you to relive painful memories from childhood in a protected environment. Brenda Milner and Scoville and Penfield had just described that the structure critical to studying memory was a structure deep in the temporal lobe called the hippocampus. So I thought I would apply single-cell techniques to the hippocampus. No one had done this before. No one knew the character of the cells that were critical for memory. I convinced a young colleague to join me in this effort, Alden Spencer, and we were the first ones to record from this. It was an explosion. Our colleagues around us went wild. They said, this is a typical NIH experience. Two incompetent young people, no knowledge whatsoever, come here and we bring them up to a new level. They do interesting science. It got a lot of attention. It was really a major contribution.
Why I have enjoyed research so much and why I currently enjoy it so much is the thrill of the chase. And then every once in a while, the joy of discovery.
I'm a strong believer in focus, 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 which I tell my students, rather than being all over the lot, focus on one thing, focus on an important problem. It's as difficult to work on an important problem as on a trivial one, and to try to make some progress with it by focusing on it, and to bring some creativity to bear on it.
The central concept in density functional theory is so simple that one can write it down in one line, and one can understand it by writing it down in one line. Then I said to myself, that can't be. And I spent a long time to understand that paradox. I tried to convince myself this must be wrong.
I tell this to students that they should believe in themselves, and sometimes they're going to be wrong, but that's the other side of it, of believing in your intuition and everything, that you do have to take chances. But if you don't take chances, it's very unlikely that you will get that far in your research.
The other piece is that this is done on behalf of people whom I will never meet and who will benefit from this when I'm gone.
I think that motivation is not only because of ambition to get a Nobel Prize, but it gives you something from the inside. And that is the important part. The reason you are motivated is because it gives you something that other things don't.
We can't become too dogmatic. And older people tend to become dogmatic. They fall in love with their own theories. They're comfortable. You know, I'm comfortable with the theory that cholesterol should be lower, and therefore I'm not thinking of other things. And, you know, why do anything else? Well, I think that's wrong. We can't. And I think that, you know, I think particularly people who have titles and who have responsibilities and tend to become very dogmatic. They can become fixed. And I think that that's very bad.
I think my greatest pleasure as a critic has been to find the winners, frankly, is to be able to, Sylvia Plath. I worked on Sylvia Plath before anybody else did. Nobody had written on her yet, and I had read a few things by her, and I wrote a number of essays. I never did a book on her, and I felt very proud. And Frank O'Hara, when I wrote the book on him in '77, it's still practically the only book on him, he was completely unknown. And then since then, now people will say, oh, obviously one of the great poets of the period. And that makes you feel, wow.
Nach meinem ganzen Dafürhalten ist die Literatur Österreichs etwas anderes als die Literatur Deutschlands. Natürlich nicht in jedem Zusammenhang und jedem Sinn, aber es gibt etwas Österreichisches. Und ich habe also früh österreichische Literatur als österreichische Literatur angeboten. Ich war, glaube ich, der Erste in Amerika, der ein Seminar über österreichische Literatur als österreichische Literatur an der Harvard University anbot.
An sich wollte ich das Deutsch jahrelang gern verlernen. ist mir nicht gelungen. Und schließlich habe ich mir gedacht, eigentlich wozu? Es ist mein Erbe. Und ein wertvolles Erbe wirft man nicht weg, wenn es einem doch gehört.
People like me are not in exile. We are refugees, ex-refugees. And somebody who goes into exile, like Thomas Mann, he prepares, he knows where he's going, he takes along whatever he wants to take along. He's welcomed highly. He then likes to return, perhaps at some point, to Europe. A refugee is somebody who runs for his life with a backpack. That's a very different feeling. In the refugee, everything has stopped and something unknown is going to happen. Terrifying.
At the end of the war, both my parents were murdered. That influenced everything in my life.
I grew up with 9 girl cousins and 1 boy cousin. Somehow, girls were rampant in our families. And of those 9, 6 were killed. So I really felt the impact of the camps.
I'm often asked, should we eliminate memories from people's brains? I think not at all. I think you should make them feel more comfortable with painful memories. But we are who we are because of what we learn, what we remember. You don't want to change. I don't want to forget about my Vienna experience. It was terribly unpleasant, but, granted, concentration camp experience, you can think of experiences that are much more horrific than what I experienced. But I think one should not do that.
Very few people, to my knowledge, have actually gone back to Vienna after being driven out. And have gone for various reasons, but their number is small.
I avoided coming to Vienna many years. That actually I followed the route of my father. He wouldn't come here for €1,000,000. But I decided to see the place where I was born, and my parents were not alive anymore. So there was a cousin who told us it's on Seegasse. I don't remember the number, she said, but it's opposite to a house of old people. And so we came there with a camera, and this house was opposite to 3 buildings. So we chose the nicest one and made a photograph, but that for sure was not the right one.
And I went with some misgivings. I felt that anybody over the age of 30 was guilty until proved innocent. But at the same time, I went to the opera every evening, and I sat in the Kaffeehäuser. So one could enjoy the place. The Viennese lifestyle was beginning to revive.
Austria had zero interest in me for 70-odd years after I left. And all of a sudden, I'm this rock star, as I mentioned, And in that sense, and I also said, that it's a little bit late.
I think the Austrians didn't want the exiles back. Certainly not at the beginning. For a long time, they didn't accept any responsibility for any of this. So, they were the victims. And so I don't think they wanted them back. But then they began to make inroads, not only in terms of reparations, but my mother has some degrees, some honorary degrees. My father does. They're the archives there of both of them. And so they did start going back. But that took a while.
Den einzigen Emigranten, den sie zurück wollten, war Oskar Pollack, die Arbeiterzeitung zu redigieren. Die anderen wollten sie nicht zurückhaben. Es war teilweise, weil, wenn sie zurückkommen, nehmen sie Stellen, die andere Leute haben, aber es war teilweise auch antisemitisch. Sogar die Sozialistische Partei war davon angegriffen.
Als ich den Nobelpreis bekommen war, hatte, läutet das Telefon immer. Und viele waren, diese Telefonrufe waren von Wien, wunderbar, einander österreichisches Nobelpreis, habe ich Ihnen gesagt, nein, es ist falsch. Das ist ein amerikanischer Nobelpreis, ein jüdisch-amerikanischer Nobelpreis.
I get a feeling when I come back to Vienna that this is Heimat. There isn't even a good English word. It's very strange. I mean, certainly, I don't feel that coming to Boston when I fly from London to Boston. Yeah, I know I'm going home, you know, and so on and so forth, but it's a different feeling. From Vienna. And what I do is I go to Zeilinger, usually within the first 24 hours. And and the house is there. And I look up at it. I wander back and forth. My poor wife, who accompanies me there, now she's gotten to the point where she says, why don't we go there and get it over with so that we can do boom, 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 have dinner or whatever it is. So it's a ritual for me.
We are talking here about the excellence, in quotes, of a small slice. We are not talking about the huge majority, 97% that were killed or starved to death, children like me, in Nazi Europe, and only 7% escaped alive. And out of those 7%, we are just looking at those that achieved excellence.
Ich versuche, einen Roman zu schreiben. Das liegt mir eigentlich sehr auf der Seele. Es ist das Letzte, was ich noch machen möchte, wenn es mir gelingt. Aber der Untergrund, also die Basis von diesem Roman, ist die Rolle des Zufalls im Leben. Und das, letzten Endes geht diese Besessenheit über Zufall, im Gegensatz zu Vorsehung oder festen Gegebenheiten, geht diese Besessenheit oder dieses Interesse an Zufall auf die Tatsache zurück, dass ich einem reinen Zufall das Leben verdanke. Zufall, der innerhalb von 15 Minuten, 30 Minuten stattgefunden hat, dass ich ausgewählt wurde, obwohl viel zu jung, in Zwangsarbeitlager zu kommen von einem Vernichtungslager.
The famous statement, post-Holocaust statement of never again. And, you know, some people have interpreted that as never again can Jews allow that to happen to them. I have always interpreted it as never again. Excuse me. Can that be done to any people?